The Christmas special has become somewhat of a staple of the holiday season, and while some have passed the test of time and gone on to establish themselves in such a way that to some Christmas without them simply wouldn't be Christmas, it has to be said that for every Grinch Who Stole Christmas, there are dozens of specials that simply don't hit the mark, and between 1987 and 1997, the urge to try and create the next big Christmas classic arguably geared up for one of its most fevered pitches. In that decade window, hundreds of specials were produced as the cost of production and distribution lowered to the point that anyone with basic access to resources could put in and produce their own holiday-themed special. Usually for VHS only release, with a frankly extortionate price tag attached to them. We covered one of these last year with Dot and Spot's Magical Christmas Adventure, but frankly that was the tip of the iceberg. Even some mild digging while looking into info on that special unearthed dozens of other specials hiding just below the surface. Most of these typically ran to around the 20 to 25 minute mark and have obvious goals of trying to aim for that sweet syndication spot on kids' TV. Whether it was Nick or Cartoon Network, back in the late 80s or early 90s, if you could get a foot in the door on the Christmas syndication run, you're pretty much guaranteed to turn a profit for 5 to 10 years, at least. Today I'm going to be looking at a film that failed to make it into that roster, but did manage to get a VHS and DVD release. 1993's Nick and Noel. 1993's Nick and Noel. See? Because it's Christmas. So lame. Anyway, Nick and Noel stars Nick and Noel as a cat and dog duo who at first hate each other. You see, Nick belongs to a famous singer who has a very loud and out-and-out attitude towards life, whereas Noel belongs to a quiet family consisting of a hard-working, quiet husband who's a writer, and his sad and lonely daughter Sarah. The family has recently been hit hard by the loss of Sarah's mother to an undisclosed incident, and Noel is trying her best to keep the little girl's spirits up. And at this point I feel I need to tell you that this Christmas special is actually a flashback to an earlier time, as narrated by a mouse who's voiced by Paul the Phantom of the Paradise Williams, who lives in the skirting board, as did his father, and so on. Anyway, as Christmas Day rapidly approaches, animosity begins to grow between the writer and the singer. With one complaining that the other is too loud and obnoxious, this causes tensions to heat up not only between the grown-ups but between the pets as well, which only makes Sarah sadder to the point where she ends up writing a letter to Santa asking for her mother to come back. However, a couple of days before Christmas, Noel finds out that Sarah's dad has been so busy he's forgotten to post her letter to Santa. And with Christmas literally a day or so away, doesn't make it all too clear, Noel must put aside her animosity towards Nick in order to ensure the delivery of Sarah's letter. In a journey that will not only bring Nick and Noel together as friends instead of enemies, but may also even help unite the adults over a common goal. Will Christmas be saved? Well, if Nick and Noel are on the case, the odds are pretty much guaranteed to be a yes. I'm going to be absolutely honest with you right off the bat here because I think it'll probably save you time. This film is bland. Oh, good God, it's so boring and bland and predictable and grey and dull, and I've spent the best part of 3 weeks with the title and some basic notes sat in my notebook because I've been so apathetic about talking about this one that it's actually numbed me from wanting to talk about it. In many ways, it's the perfect defence mechanism. Make something so dull and generic that no one will want to go near it from a critical or analytical standpoint. You can't get bad reviews if you make it so plain no one wants to review it. It means that poor schmucks who don't know any better will end up going out and spending their hard-earned money on this, or God forbid even worse, their time, and they'll end up wasting both. Well, I sat through this mediocrity and you know what? It's bland! I've already said it, but I need to say it again. From frame 1 of this special, you know you're in for a sanitised and generic walk through the Christmas park with this one. It's a generic shot of a small mansion decked to the halls with boughs of holly and snow, and Christmassy generic music is playing in the background. And it doesn't really improve from there. This special is brought to us by John Sperry and written by Steve Whitestone and Rachel Koretsky. Sperry is a bit of a veteran of the field when it comes to animation direction and stylisation, having a career that spans back as far as the late 1950s. Though he's kind of jumped around the field quite a bit, and because of this his filmography has him listed as having bit parts in the creation of animations such as Lord of the Rings and several Hanna-Barbera cartoons, when in reality probably his most well-known work that can be directly linked to his involvement would be a directing stint on The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse and a time on Garfield and Friends. Not adding to this whirlwind of inspiration, this was Steve Whitestone's first credited project. And other than this, his filmography is pretty damn slim, really. Koretsky, by contrast, has at least one other credit to her name. Though it is rather infamous at this point, she is credited for having played multiple roles in the creation of the somewhat forgotten MS-DOS classic Mario's Time Machine. Again though, this was pretty much her first project too. So in summary, we have a veteran of the field helping direct two writers, both of whom for this it was their first big break, and I think that quite nicely gives an indication as to my feelings about this one ultimately. The animation isn't awful, the characters all have a unique look and feel, and there's certainly a fluidity about each scene's structure. Though it must be said that they've really failed in trying to sync up the dialogue to the animation's mouth movements. And if I'm being honest, as a broad stroke comment, I do really need to stress that ultimately the animation as a whole is very reflective of animation at the time. There's nothing new or interesting here. Nothing really trying to push the envelope. It looks like any other animation being churned out around this time, and as a result it's just a little bit unmemorable. Within the animation itself, the characters are fairly well defined, but just because these characters look unique doesn't mean that the animation overall is all that interesting. See Poochie, for example. The voice acting is relatively passable. Paul Williams is quite wonderful as this short's narrator, and Noel is voiced by Kath Soucie, who's been in frankly a ludicrous amount of animated shows, but's probably best known as the voice of Phil and Lil from the Rugrats. Though I was probably most familiar with her work in various different character roles in The Critic. She's arguably the strongest voice actor in this short, and frankly I do rather feel she's a bit wasted here. She's very talented, and to see her performing in a role like this was actually quite surprising to me. Pretty much the entirety of the remaining voice acting cast are pretty forgettable. They all have an animated quality to their voices, but in all honesty they just sound cartoony, and that's not really enough to win a crowd over. It's all rather meh, to be honest. The soundtrack is slushy and generic, it's typical sleigh bells and riffs on public domain holiday classics, all standard fodder, and again nothing particularly standout. It's just totally bland, and it really makes the overall work suffer because without a good solid OST to help punctuate some of the more impactful moments in this, it just makes those scenes fall down. I also have to say that this is one of the rare occasions where we have a film that's tried to be a bit more out there on the subjects dealt with in a kids' film, but somehow managed to fail miserably with it. The idea that Sarah's recently lost her mother is a really interesting plot point, and it would have been great to explore the grieving process or the escapism that a child can have when dealing with something as life-changing as the death of a parent. But no. Instead we get a passing allusion to it in the opening 4 minutes, and then a very brief follow-up to it about 10 minutes in when Sarah is telling Noel about what she wants for Christmas. And other than that, the film gives you nothing to really work with in regards to the dead parent angle. Maybe it would have been nice to have Sarah imagining that Nick and Noel could talk. Maybe bring Sarah into the adventure to get a letter to Santa, or maybe even have Noel talk about the death of the mother from her perspective. The fact that this plot point is left fairly threadbare really bothers me. It's half-hearted, and the actual adventure we do end up going on with Nick and Noel isn't really all that rewarding either. I honestly don't really have anything positive to say about the script, really. While it was sort of brave for them to do the death of a parent angle, that's the only standout thing they do, and they cock that up pretty much immediately by jettisoning the idea rather than exploring it. The rest of the script is just so uninteresting and typical of the Christmas adventure formula that it's desperately stale, underwhelming, and generally quite unappealing. Nick and Noel was originally released direct to VHS in 1993 and was later re-released in 2005 by Abbey Home Media. While I can't comment on a DVD release, I watched this from a VHS source, I can't honestly see them screwing this one up. The VHS copy is pretty reasonable quality, and even if they did a direct rip from tape to disc, I can't see it being particularly awful. Extras are pretty thin on the ground, as if anyone expected any less, but what genuinely did surprise me? The animation team who originally produced Nick and Noel were none other than Film Roman, who you probably better know as the company behind the animation for The Simpsons from 1992 to 2016, King of the Hill, and the Tom and Jerry movie. Which I think's pretty mad, because when you compare and contrast, while it's to standard, it's a completely different ballgame to those shows, which I think only further proves my case that script and dialogue can trump animation. Nick and Noel is underwhelming, dull, and frankly, well, to repeat myself, bland. It brings nothing new to the table, it doesn't explore any new ideas that haven't already been covered, and it's not even in the better half of films in its field. If it maybe tried something different, I could probably be more in favour of it, but its total lack of any kind of ambition, interest, hook or memorable moment to keep me coming back year on year just makes this a totally drab watch. While it's not bad enough for me to tell you to outright avoid it, honestly, I think you'd be wasting your time to look into this one. There are much better films out there that do much better attempts at stuff like this. Unless you're morbidly curious, in which case, be my guest, it's 21 minutes of your own time you'll be wasting. All I can really say is it's Christmas time. Go and spend some time with a loved one. Or something. Anything other than watching this.